Do you think you know medieval queens? Or are they just pretty faces in historical tapestries waiting for their knight in shining armor? Did they spend their days simply weaving and planning royal dinners? The medieval period, stretching roughly from 500 CE to 1500 CE, saw queens who defied every expectation you might hold. Number 8. Medieval queens were just figures of beauty and motherhood. Many people think medieval queens were simply chosen for their looks and their ability to produce heirs. The historical records, however, paint a much more complex picture. While beauty could play a role in attracting a suitor and producing a legitimate heir was a fundamental duty, the influence and duties of a queen went far beyond these limited expectations. Queens were often highly educated, skilled administrators, and powerful diplomatic agents. Their marriages were not just personal unions, they were critical political alliances, solidifying peace treaties, expanding territories, and bringing vast wealth and influence to a kingdom. The value of a queen often lay in her connections, her intellect, and her ability to navigate the treacherous waters of court politics and international relations. Eleanor of Aquitaine, born around 1122, serves as a remarkable example. She was not merely a beautiful face. She inherited one of the wealthiest and most powerful territories in France, the Duchy of Aquitaine and Gascony. Her marriage to Louis VII of France instantly doubled his kingdom's size and resources. Eleanor was known for her sharp mind, her extensive education, and her strong will. She accompanied Louis on the Second Crusade, a venture where she was noted for her political observations and her independent spirit, which sometimes clashed with her husband's more pious nature. After their annulment, she quickly married Henry Plantagenet, who later became King Henry II of England. The second marriage transferred Aquitaine to the English crown, triggering centuries of conflict between England and France, but it also made Eleanor one of the most powerful women in Europe. She actively governed her vast lands, holding court, administering justice, and patronizing troubadours and poets who made her court a center of culture and chivalry. Her influence was so profound that she played a significant role in her sons' political careers, even instigating rebellions against Henry II to support their claims. Her actions shaped the political landscape of both France and England for generations. Another queen who defied the mere beauty and motherhood stereotype was Theophanu, who became Empress of the Holy Roman Empire in 972 through her marriage to Emperor Otto II. Theophanu was a Byzantine princess, highly educated in the sophisticated imperial court of Constantinople. She brought with her not just imperial lineage, but also a profound understanding of administration, diplomacy, and culture from the Eastern Roman Empire. She signed charters and documents alongside her husband, an unusual practice for a queen, indicating her deep involvement in governmental affairs. When Otto II died unexpectedly in 983, leaving their 3-year-old son, Otto III, as emperor, Theophanu stepped in as regent. For 11 years, she ruled the Holy Roman Empire with remarkable skill and authority. She faced down rebellious nobles, managed complex imperial territories, and pursued an active foreign policy, demonstrating a political acumen that went far beyond what was expected of a female ruler of her time. Her regency was marked by stability and the maintenance of imperial power, laying a strong foundation for her son's future reign. She ensured the preservation of the empire during a critical period, relying on her intelligence and administrative prowess rather than just her status as a mother. Matilda of Flanders, Queen of England and Duchess of Normandy, married William the Conqueror in the 1050s. She was a descendant of Anglo-Saxon kings, giving William's claim to the English throne a valuable layer of legitimacy after the Norman conquest. Matilda was not a quiet queen who stayed in the background. While William was away campaigning in England, she often acted as regent in Normandy, governing the duchy in his stead. She presided over councils, heard petitions, and issued charters, showing her capability as an administrator. And she commissioned the famous Bayeux Tapestry, a monumental work of art that depicted the Norman conquest from their perspective, serving as a powerful piece of propaganda and historical record. This act revealed her sophisticated understanding of how to shape public narrative and legitimize her husband's rule. Her active involvement in governance and her patronage of significant cultural projects demonstrated her influence and intellectual engagement beyond her roles as wife and mother. Adelaide of Italy, who lived in the 10th century, had a tumultuous life that showcased her strength and political savvy. She was widowed twice, imprisoned, and yet managed to secure her position and ultimately become Empress of the Holy Roman Empire through her marriage to Otto I. After Otto's death, she played a significant role in the regency for her grandson, Otto III, during the period after Theophanu's death. Adelaide was known for her intelligence, her diplomatic skills, and her strong personal will. She maintained a network of political alliances and religious foundations, demonstrating that her influence was not merely derived from her marital status but from her own abilities and connections. She was deeply involved in church reform movements and was known for her charitable works, further solidifying her public image as a powerful and pious figure. Her life story is one of survival and assertion in a world dominated by men, proving that queens were far from passive figures defined solely by their reproductive capacities. Isabella of France, Queen of England, married King Edward II in the early 14th century. She was initially valued for her royal French lineage, which brought prestige and alliances to the English court. However, her life quickly moved beyond the typical expectations for a queen. Her dissatisfied with her husband's favoritism towards male courtiers and his disastrous policies, Isabella eventually left England and traveled to France, ostensibly on a diplomatic mission. There, she formed an alliance with Roger Mortimer, an exiled English baron. Together, they mounted an invasion of England, deposed Edward II, and placed their son, Edward III, on the throne. For several years, Isabella and Mortimer effectively ruled England as regents for the young king. This dramatic act of overthrowing a reigning monarch, unprecedented for a queen, clearly demonstrated that Isabella was no mere ornament. She was a politically active and ruthless player who recognized power vacuums and acted decisively to protect her interests and those of her son. Her actions profoundly altered the course of English history, showing a queen who took matters of governance and royal authority into her own hands, proving that their roles extended far beyond bearing heirs or looking aesthetically pleasing. These examples illustrate that medieval queens were multifaceted individuals who wielded considerable power and influence. Their roles were often defined by their political acumen, their administrative skills, their diplomatic capabilities, and their ability to navigate complex dynastic relationships. They were not just wives and mothers, they were active participants in the governance and cultural life of their kingdoms, leaving indelible marks on history through their intellect, ambition, and strategic actions. Number 7. Queens had no real political clout or involvement. A common idea about medieval queens is that they were excluded from the serious business of politics, relegated to the domestic sphere while kings made all the important decisions. This view ignores the extensive and often crucial political roles many queens played. They served as regents, handled diplomatic negotiations, acted as intermediaries between feuding factions, managed vast territories, and often held significant influence over their husbands' policies. Their access to the king, their unique position within the court, and their independent resources often provided them with avenues for exercising political power. Blanche of Castile, Queen of France, offers a prime example of a queen with immense political clout. When her husband, King Louis VIII, died in 1226, their son Louis IX was only 12 years old. Blanche immediately stepped in as regent, a role she held for many years, even after Louis IX came of age, due to her son's continued reliance on her counsel. Her regency was not a quiet period of guardianship, it was marked by severe political challenges. She faced down powerful feudal lords who resented the royal authority and sought to take advantage of a child king. She personally led armies into battle, secured strategic alliances, and successfully negotiated peace treaties. For instance, she crushed the rebellion of the Count of Brittany and signed the Treaty of Paris in 1229, which brought an end to the Albigensian Crusade and integrated Languedoc into the French royal domain. Blanche was a shrewd politician known for her intelligence, piety, and unwavering determination. She oversaw significant reforms in royal administration, strengthened the monarchy, and ensured the stability of the kingdom during a very turbulent period. Her political impact was so great that some historians argue she was one of the most effective rulers in French history, regardless of gender. She was not just influencing policy, she was setting it, executing it, and defending the kingdom's interests with an iron will. Isabella of Hainault, Queen of France, provides another example, albeit one of a different kind of political involvement. When married to Philip II Augustus, Isabella brought with her the county of Artois as her dowry, a strategically important territory that greatly enhanced the French crown's power. Beyond her territorial contribution, Isabella was a skilled negotiator and mediator. She actively worked to maintain peace between her husband and her family, the Counts of Flanders and Hainault, who were often at odds with the French crown. Her ability to navigate these complex family and political relationships helped to stabilize the northern borders of France during a period of expansion for Philip Augustus. She also played a significant role in securing the succession, giving birth to the future Louis VIII. Her political activity was perhaps less overt than Blanche of Castile's, but her role in diplomatic alliances and her influence within the court were undeniable, contributing to the broader political stability and expansion of the kingdom. Her actions show that queens were not passive recipients of their husbands' policies, but often active participants in shaping the political landscape through their connections and mediation. Catherine of Valois, Queen of England, married King Henry V. While her direct political influence was perhaps more subtle than some other queens, her role in solidifying the English claim to the French throne was immense. Through the Treaty of Troyes in 1420, which her marriage sealed, her son, the future Henry VI, was designated as heir to both the English and French crowns. Catherine's very presence and her lineage were political acts. After Henry V's sudden death, she found herself in a complex position as the mother of an infant king. Although the Regency Council held the reins of power, Catherine remained a significant figure, the royal mother, whose legitimacy was crucial for the fragile Anglo-French union. Her later secret marriage to Owen Tudor, which founded the Tudor dynasty, had profound, albeit unforeseen at the time, political consequences for England, leading to the War of the Roses and ultimately the reign of Henry VII. Her choices, even personal ones, carried immense political weight, illustrating that queens were central figures in dynastic politics. Urraca of Leon and Castile, who reigned in the early 12th century, offers a unique case as a queen regnant, ruling in her own right. After her father's death, she inherited the kingdoms of Leon and Castile. Her reign was fraught with challenges, including civil wars, the assertion of noble power, and conflicts with her second husband, Alfonso I of Aragon. Despite these difficulties, Urraca actively governed her kingdoms. She led armies, presided over councils, issued charters, and negotiated treaties. Her reign showcased a queen who was not just involved in politics, but was the ultimate political authority, battling to maintain her control over her vast territories. Though her reign was marked by conflict, her ability to maintain her position and pass on her kingdoms to her son, Alfonso VII, demonstrates her formidable political will and capacity. She proved that a woman could hold and exercise supreme political power in a medieval kingdom. Margaret of Denmark, who lived in the late 14th and early 15th centuries, is another extraordinary example of a queen with immense political power. She was the daughter of the King of Denmark, married to the King of Norway, and her son became king of both Denmark and Norway. When her son died, she effectively became the de facto ruler of both kingdoms. She then engineered the union of Denmark, Norway, and Sweden under one monarch, her grandnephew Eric of Pomerania, through the Union of Kalmar in 1397. Margaret held the reins of power, ruling these three kingdoms through her chosen heir for decades. She was a master diplomat, a shrewd negotiator, and a capable administrator. She successfully quelled rebellions, asserted royal authority, and established a long-lasting political union that dominated Northern Europe for over a century. Her political acumen and strategic vision were unparalleled, demonstrating that a queen could not only be involved in politics, but could reshape the entire political map of a continent through her own initiative and leadership. These historical accounts clearly demonstrate that many medieval queens were far from passive figures devoid of political influence. They actively participated in governance, diplomacy, and warfare, often at the highest levels. Their contributions were vital to the stability and prosperity of their kingdoms, showcasing their significant and often decisive political clout. Number 6, queens were always helpless pawns in dynastic marriages. It is easy to think of medieval queens as mere bargaining chips, traded between kingdoms to forge alliances, without any agency or personal will. While it is true that dynastic marriages were primarily political and economic arrangements, many queens were not helpless pawns. They often exercised significant agency within their marriages, using their positions to advance their own interests, their family's interests, or even to influence the policies of their new kingdoms. They could become powerful figures through their dowries, dower lands, and their ability to produce heirs, using these assets as leverage. Some queens actively negotiated terms, maintained independent courts, and skillfully navigated court politics to gain influence. Eleanor of Provence, Queen of England, married King Henry III in 1236. Her marriage brought not only her own considerable intelligence and beauty, but also a network of Provençal relatives who came to England and rose to prominence at court. While some English barons resented this influx of foreigners, Eleanor skillfully used her family connections to her advantage, building a strong power base. She was a shrewd businesswoman and administrator, actively involved in the management of her dower lands, which provided her with a significant independent income. She used this wealth to patronize art, architecture, and religious foundations. When Henry III faced baronial opposition, Eleanor often advised him and actively supported his policies. During Henry's absence in France, she often acted as regent, demonstrating her administrative capabilities. For instance, she organized supplies for her husband's campaigns and helped to raise funds. Her strong will and intelligence allowed her to maintain influence throughout her long life, even supporting her son Edward I after Henry's death. She was no passive figure but an active participant in her new kingdom's politics and economy. Isabella of Castile, Queen of Castile and Leon, whose reign began in 1474, represents a powerful example of a queen who defied the helpless pawn narrative. Her marriage to Ferdinand II of Aragon was not a simple arrangement but a complex political maneuver that united the two largest Christian kingdoms of the Iberian Peninsula. Isabella actively fought for her right to rule Castile independently of her husband, signing an agreement that affirmed her direct control over her kingdom and its finances. She was a warrior queen in her own right, riding into battle zones, personally overseeing military campaigns, and inspiring her troops during the Reconquista, the long struggle to expel Muslim rule from Spain. She also established the Spanish Inquisition and sponsored Christopher Columbus's voyages, profoundly shaping the course of global history. Her reign was one of intense political activity, religious zeal, and significant expansion of royal power. She was very much the driving force behind many of the decisions that led to the formation of modern Spain, demonstrating that her marriage was a partnership where she was the dominant force within her own realm, far from being a pawn. Margaret of Anjou, Queen of England, married King Henry VI during the Wars of the Roses. While Henry VI was a weak and often mentally unstable king, Margaret took on a fiercely active role in defending her husband's Lancastrian claim to the throne and securing the future of their son, Edward. She personally led armies, negotiated with powerful nobles, and rallied support for her cause. Her determination and military leadership earned her both admiration and condemnation from her contemporaries, who often described her as a she-wolf for her relentless pursuit of her family's interests. Despite ultimately losing the war, her actions show a queen who was far from a pawn. She manipulated political situations, made strategic alliances, and fought tooth and nail for her family's survival, proving her immense agency and political will in a brutal civil war. She was a prime example of a queen who actively shaped events, rather than being passively shaped by them. Joan of Navarre, Queen of England, married Henry IV in 1403. While her role as Queen of England was less about direct governance, her life before and during her marriage shows a strategic mind. She was the daughter of King Charles II of Navarre and the widow of John IV, Duke of Brittany. As Duchess of Brittany, she had acted as regent for her young sons, demonstrating her administrative and political capabilities. Her marriage to Henry IV provided him with an important dynastic link to continental Europe and her substantial personal wealth. After Henry's death, she remained a politically significant figure, though she was later accused of witchcraft and imprisoned by her stepson, Henry V. Even in adversity, Joan demonstrated a will to survive and maintain her position, engaging in legal battles to secure her freedom and regain her property. Her life trajectory shows a woman who is capable of governing territories and navigating the complexities of medieval aristocratic power, using her marital alliances to further her own standing and that of her family. Matilda, Empress of the Holy Roman Empire and claimant to the English throne in the 12th century, was truly a woman who refused to be a pawn. Daughter of King Henry I of England, she was first married to Emperor Henry V, becoming empress. After his death, her father named her his heir to England and Normandy. When Henry I died, her cousin Stephen seized the throne, leading to a long and brutal civil war known as the Anarchy. Matilda fought relentlessly for her right to rule. She led armies, besieged castles, and engaged in complex political maneuvers. Although she never formally reigned as Queen of England, her military campaigns and political persistence ensured that her son, Henry Plantagenet, eventually succeeded to the English throne as Henry II, establishing the Plantagenet dynasty. Her entire adult life was a testament to her refusal to be a pawn in the male-dominated world of medieval succession. She actively asserted her claim, demonstrating agency and determination throughout decades of conflict. These powerful figures illustrate that while dynastic marriages were tools of statecraft, the women involved were often far from helpless. Many queens found ways to assert their agency, wield power, and shape events through their intelligence, administrative skills, political connections, and sheer force of will, defying the passive image of a mere bargaining chip. Number 5, queens live lives of pure luxury and ease. The popular image of a medieval queen often involves lavish gowns, endless banquets, and a life free from hardship. The reality, however, was often a harsh, demanding, and precarious existence. Queens faced constant travel, the dangers of childbirth, political intrigue, military campaigns, and the relentless pressure to produce heirs. Their lives were far from easy, involving significant responsibilities and often considerable personal risk. The luxurious aspects of their lives were often balanced by discomfort, danger, and constant public scrutiny. Edith of Wessex, Queen of England, wife of Edward the Confessor in the 11th century, had a life far from pure ease. Her powerful family, the Godwins, often clashed with the king. In 1051, her father, Earl Godwin, fell out of favor, and Edward banished the entire family, including Edith. She was sent to a convent and stripped of her royal status and lands. This banishment, a public humiliation, and loss of status shows the precariousness of a queen's position, even one married to the king. Although she was later restored to her position when her family regained power, her experience highlights that queens were not immune to political upheaval and could face severe consequences for their family's actions. Her life was entwined with the volatile politics of Anglo-Saxon England, demonstrating that security and comfort were never guaranteed, even at the highest level of society. Empress Matilda, as discussed in the previous chapter, faced a life defined by struggle, not ease. After her first husband, Emperor Henry V, died, she returned to England only to be declared heir by her father. The subsequent civil war, the Anarchy, consumed decades of her life. She was constantly on the move, leading sieges, negotiating with fickle allies, and enduring hardships that few women, let alone queens, typically experienced. She was besieged in Oxford Castle in 1142, and famously escaped across the frozen River Thames, dressed in white to blend in with the snow. This act of daring and survival demonstrates a life of acute physical danger and hardship, far removed from the imagined comfort of a royal court. Her struggle for the throne was physically and emotionally exhausting, showcasing the extreme demands placed upon a queen who sought to rule in her own right. Isabella of France, Queen of England, lived a life full of emotional and political turmoil. Her marriage to Edward II was notoriously difficult, marked by her husband's favoritism towards male companions and his political ineptitude. And Isabella's frustration and sense of powerlessness grew as her husband alienated the English nobility and mismanaged the kingdom. She eventually fled to France, seeking support to overthrow her husband. Her decision to invade England with Roger Mortimer, depose her husband, and rule as regent was a dangerous and desperate act. She lived in constant fear of counter-revolutions and plots, and her period of regency was not one of leisure but intense political maneuvering and vigilance. Ultimately, she was herself overthrown by her son Edward III and spent the remainder of her life under house arrest. Her life story is a testament to the immense personal and political risks queens often took, far from an existence of pure ease. Adelaide of Italy, Empress of the Holy Roman Empire, endured multiple kidnappings, imprisonments, and forced marriages in the 10th century. After the death of her first husband, King Lothair II of Italy, she was imprisoned by his successor, Berengar II, who wanted her to marry his son to consolidate his power. Adelaide managed to escape her confinement, reportedly by digging a tunnel or being smuggled out in a cart of dung. She then appealed to Otto I of Germany for help, eventually marrying him and becoming empress. Even after achieving this high status, her life was punctuated by political intrigue and conflicts, including a period of estrangement from her son, Otto II. Her experiences demonstrate the extreme dangers and lack of personal freedom that could characterize the lives of even the most high-born women in the medieval period, proving that their path was often one of survival rather than indulgence. Philippa of Hainault, Queen of England, married to Edward III, might seem to embody the image of a successful, popular queen. She was known for her kindness and diplomatic skills, however, her life was also one of constant travel. Edward III was frequently engaged in wars in France, and Philippa often accompanied him on campaigns, living in temporary camps and enduring the hardships of war. She gave birth to 14 children, a staggering number, and many of them did not survive to adulthood, highlighting the ever-present danger of childbirth and child mortality for medieval queens. She also played a significant role in ruling England as regent during her husband's absences, which meant carrying the immense burden of governance and managing the realm during wartime. While she may have enjoyed periods of luxury, her life was also filled with demanding duties, personal sorrow, and the physical rigors of constant movement and childbearing, far from an existence of idleness. These queens, through their personal narratives, show that their lives were not simply filled with luxury and leisure. They navigated political dangers, faced the very real threats of war and childbirth, endured significant personal losses, and carried immense responsibilities for their kingdoms and their dynasties. Their experiences reveal a reality that was often fraught with hardship, danger, and relentless demands. Number 4, queens had no economic or legal control of their own. The idea that medieval queens were entirely dependent on their husbands and lacked independent economic or legal control is a widespread misunderstanding. In reality, many queens managed vast economic resources, held significant property rights, and exercised legal authority within their own domains or even across the kingdom. Their wealth came from sources like dowries, dower lands, and specific queens' revenues, allowing them to fund their households, patronize the arts, engage in charity, and sometimes even fund military campaigns. Their legal powers could include presiding over courts, issuing charters, and protecting the rights of their subjects. Matilda of England, Countess of Anjou and Empress of the Holy Roman Empire, possessed significant economic and legal autonomy. As the daughter of Henry I, she inherited vast personal wealth and lands. Her dowry for her marriage to Emperor Henry V was substantial, and as Empress, she had control over significant imperial estates and revenues. When she returned to England to claim her father's throne, she commanded her own resources to fund her military campaigns against Stephen. Even without fully securing the English throne, she maintained control over Normandy for a period, where she issued her own charters, granted lands, and administered justice, demonstrating her legal authority. Her ability to independently manage her vast economic resources and exercise legal powers in her territories was crucial to her sustained fight for the English crown. She was not a queen whose financial and legal standing was merely tied to her husband. She commanded her own substantial assets and authority. Eleanor of Aquitaine, whose vast inherited lands were discussed earlier, provides a powerful illustration of a queen with immense economic and legal control. As Duchess of Aquitaine in her own right, she was the feudal overlord of a large and wealthy territory, collecting taxes, administering justice, and commanding loyalty from her vassals. Even as Queen of France and later Queen of England, she retained significant control over her ducal revenues. After her divorce from Louis VII, she ensured her lands returned with her, demonstrating her independent economic power. When she was held captive by her second husband, Henry II, for many years, her dower lands in England and Normandy were managed by her agents, but she maintained the ultimate proprietary right. Upon her release, she immediately reasserted direct control, using her vast wealth to support her son Richard the Lionheart's crusading efforts and later his ransom. She issued her own charters, sealed documents with her own seal, and heard petitions from her subjects, actively exercising her legal authority. Her economic and legal independence was a cornerstone of her extraordinary influence. Blanche of Castile, as queen and later regent of France, held significant economic resources. She managed not only the royal treasury during her regency, but also her own extensive dower lands and queen's revenues. These lands provided her with an independent income, which she used to support her household, patronize monasteries and churches, and fund royal projects. Her economic control allowed her to be financially independent, which was crucial to her political power during the Regency. She issued numerous charters and legal documents in her own name, demonstrating her legal authority over these lands and their inhabitants. She also presided over courts and heard legal appeals, acting as a direct source of justice for her subjects. Her management of both the royal finances and her personal wealth showcased a queen who was a formidable economic and legal power in her own right, not merely a dependent figure. Philippa of Hainault, Queen of England, also held significant economic and legal sway. Her dower lands were extensive and provided her with a substantial income that was separate from the king's personal finances. She managed these lands diligently, ensuring their productivity and administering the estates. She was known for her patronage of the wool industry, a vital part of the English economy, and she actively supported trade, showcasing her economic interests beyond her immediate household. Philippa also exercised legal authority. She frequently interceded on behalf of her subjects, presenting petitions to the king, and sometimes even directly granting pardons or issuing legal decrees. She was actively involved in the founding of Queen's College, Oxford, using her wealth and influence to support education. Her economic independence and active participation in legal processes demonstrate that her role was far more robust than that of a financially dependent figure. Joanna I of Naples, who reigned as Queen Regnant of Naples and Countess of Provence in her own right from 1343 to 1382, stands as a clear example of a queen with absolute economic and legal control. As a sovereign ruler, she managed the entire royal treasury of the Kingdom of Naples and the revenues from her Provencal county. She collected taxes, minted coins, and controlled vast feudal estates. She was the supreme legal authority in her realms, issuing laws, presiding over the highest courts, and acting as the final arbiter of justice. Her reign was marked by political turmoil, requiring her to constantly use her economic resources to fund her armies and her legal authority to defend her throne against various claimants and powerful nobles. Her direct control over the economy and legal system of her kingdoms clearly demonstrates that some queens held complete sovereign power, disproving the notion of general economic and legal dependence. These examples show that medieval queens were often significant economic players and legal authorities. They possessed independent financial resources, managed vast properties, and exercised judicial powers, demonstrating a level of control and autonomy that challenges the misconception of them as passive figures devoid of their own economic and legal standing. Number 3, queens were isolated from the everyday lives of ordinary people. It is often imagined that medieval queens lived in a gilded cage, completely separate from the daily struggles and lives of common people. While their lives were certainly privileged compared to most, queens were far from isolated. They often traveled extensively throughout their kingdoms, engaged in acts of charity, performed public ceremonies, served as legal intermediaries, and were vital figures for subjects seeking justice or patronage. Their presence was often a direct connection between the monarchy and the everyday populace, fostering a sense of royal benevolence and accessibility. Saint Margaret of Scotland, Queen of Scotland, who lived in the 11th century, was renowned for her direct engagement with the common people. She was known for her deep piety and charitable works. Margaret personally established hospices and almshouses, providing food, shelter, and medical care for the poor and the sick. She regularly washed the feet of the poor and fed orphans, acts that were not merely symbolic but genuine efforts to alleviate suffering. She also funded ferry services across the Firth of Forth for pilgrims traveling to St. Andrews, directly benefiting ordinary travelers. Her influence extended to church reform, where she worked to standardize religious practices and improve the lives of the clergy, which indirectly benefited the wider population. Her dedication to charity and her hands-on approach to helping the less fortunate illustrate a queen who was deeply connected to and concerned with the welfare of her subjects, far from an isolated figure. Eleanor of Castile, Queen of England, wife of Edward I, actively participated in public life and connected with her subjects. She often accompanied her husband on his arduous campaigns, including the Ninth Crusade, enduring difficult conditions alongside the soldiers and non-combatants. Her presence on these journeys meant she was visible to a wide range of people, from nobles to peasants. Eleanor was a prolific patron of the arts and architecture, sponsoring the construction of many churches and castles, which created employment for numerous craftsmen and laborers. After her death, Edward I commissioned the erection of the Eleanor Crosses, magnificent monuments marking the places where her funeral procession rested on its journey from Harby to Westminster Abbey. These crosses were not just memorials, they served as public landmarks that connected her memory to towns and villages across England, ensuring her presence remained in the collective consciousness of the people. Her active patronage and the public outpouring of grief at her death show a queen who was well known and revered by the populace, not an isolated figure. Matilda of Boulogne, Queen of England, married to King Stephen in the 12th century, actively worked to alleviate suffering during the tumultuous period of the anarchy. While her husband fought for the throne, Matilda often focused on maintaining stability and providing aid. She was a significant patron of religious houses and hospitals, many of which served the poor and sick directly. Her most notable act of public engagement was her defense of London against Empress Matilda's forces. She rallied the citizens, demonstrating a direct leadership role in protecting the city and its inhabitants. She raised funds and organized supplies, showing a practical concern for the well-being of the Londoners. Her active presence during these critical times and her dedication to charitable works and public defense showcased a queen who was intimately involved in the lives of her subjects during a period of great strife. Queens also served as legal intermediaries for ordinary people. It was common for commoners to petition the queen directly for mercy, justice, or intercession with the king. Queens were often seen as more approachable, compassionate, or just, offering a different avenue for redress than the king's sometimes more rigid legal system. Many queens maintained staff specifically to handle these petitions, indicating a regular flow of appeals from ordinary subjects. For instance, queens often interceded for prisoners, pleaded for tax relief for communities in distress, or supported individuals in legal disputes. This role as a benevolent intermediary placed them in direct contact with the concerns and grievances of various segments of the population, bridging the gap between royal power and everyday life. Margaret of Denmark, as the effective ruler of the Kalmar Union, was far from isolated, and she maintained a highly visible court that traveled between her three kingdoms of Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. This constant movement meant she was seen by a wide range of people in different regions. She frequently held assemblies, heard petitions, and delivered judgments directly engaging with her subjects from all social strata. Her impressive administrative capabilities included reforming the legal system, which aimed to improve justice for ordinary citizens. She implemented policies to curb piracy, which directly benefited merchants and coastal communities. Her widespread reputation as a strong but just ruler meant that people across her vast union looked to her for leadership and stability, demonstrating a profound and direct connection between her rule and the everyday lives of a large population. These examples clearly show that medieval queens were often deeply engaged with the lives of ordinary people. Through their charitable works, public appearances, legal intercessions, and patronage, they maintained a tangible presence in their kingdoms, acting as vital links between the royal court and the wider populace, dismantling the notion of an isolated existence. Number 2. Queens were passive bystanders in religious affairs. There is a tendency to view medieval queens as merely devout followers, passive observers in the dominant religious landscape of their time. This perspective significantly underestimates their active and often crucial roles in religious affairs. Queens were powerful patrons of churches, monasteries, and convents, founding new religious institutions and endowing existing ones with land and wealth. They influenced religious policy, supported reform movements, acted as spiritual leaders, and shaped religious practices. Their piety was often a source of legitimacy and influence, allowing them to exert significant power in an era where religion and politics were inextricably linked. Saint Olga of Kiev, who governed Kievan Rus' as regent for her son Sviatoslav in the 10th century, stands as a monumental figure in religious history. After the assassination of her husband, Igor of Kiev, she acted with political acumen and ruthlessness to consolidate her power. More importantly, she undertook a journey to Constantinople and was baptized into Christianity, becoming the first ruler of Kievan Rus' to do so. Upon her return, she worked to introduce Christianity to her pagan realm, building churches and encouraging missionary activity. While her efforts to fully convert her people met with resistance during her lifetime, particularly from her son, her personal conversion and her persistent efforts laid the groundwork for the later Christianization of Rus' under her grandson, Vladimir the Great. Her actions were not passive, they were deliberate, strategic moves that profoundly shaped the spiritual future of an entire nation, demonstrating a queen who was an active and pioneering force in religious transformation. Adelaide of Italy, Empress of the Holy Roman Empire, was a significant figure in the religious life of the 10th century. She was known for her deep piety and her active involvement in the monastic reform movement. She founded numerous monasteries and churches, providing them with substantial endowments of land and wealth. These foundations were not just acts of personal devotion, they served as centers of learning and culture, and they also extended imperial influence and authority into various regions. Adelaide actively corresponded with leading abbots and churchmen of her time, advocating for ecclesiastical reform and supporting efforts to raise moral standards within the clergy. Her patronage extended to significant figures like Saint Romuald, a key figure in the eremitical monastic movement. Her influence on the church was so profound that she was eventually canonized as a saint, a testament to her active and transformative role in religious affairs. She was a central figure in shaping religious institutions and practices, far from a bystander. Matilda of Flanders, Queen of England, exercised considerable influence in religious matters through her patronage. She and William the Conqueror jointly founded and endowed several important monasteries in Normandy, notably the twin abbeys of St. Etienne and St. Trinite in Caen, which served as their respective burial places. These foundations were not just places of worship, but also strategic centers of Norman power and administration. Matilda also used her wealth to commission lavish liturgical vestments and religious artifacts for various churches, demonstrating her personal devotion and her role in beautifying sacred spaces. Her patronage extended to scholarly pursuits within the church, supporting monastic scriptoria that produced illuminated manuscripts. These actions show a queen who actively invested in religious institutions, shaping their physical presence, their economic well-being, and their intellectual contributions, thus playing a significant role in the religious landscape of her time. Berengaria of Navarre, Queen of England, wife of Richard the Lionheart, is often overlooked but still shows a queen with religious engagement. Although she spent little time in England, she accompanied Richard on the Third Crusade, a massive religious and military undertaking. Her presence provided crucial support and stability for the expedition. She was known for her piety and her support for religious houses, particularly in her native Navarre and in Cyprus, where she was briefly queen. After Richard's death, she retired to her dower lands in Maine, France, where she became a patron of the Cistercian monastery of Le Pau. She devoted her later years to religious pursuits and charitable works, demonstrating a personal commitment to the church and a role in its institutional support. Her life, though often peripatetic, reflected a consistent engagement with the religious duties and opportunities of a queen. Elizabeth of Hungary, a princess of the Kingdom of Hungary and later Landgravine of Thuringia, though not a queen, provides a powerful example of a royal woman who profoundly shaped religious piety in the 13th century. Renowned for her extreme asceticism and boundless charity, she dedicated her life to serving the poor and the sick, often against the wishes of her family and court. She used her royal wealth to establish hospitals and personally cared for the ill, even lepers, embracing a radical form of Christian charity inspired by Francis of Assisi. After her husband's death, she renounced her worldly possessions and joined the Third Order of St. Francis. Her devotion and radical piety led to her rapid canonization as a saint, less than 4 years after her death. Her example profoundly influenced religious practice and the development of lay piety across Europe, inspiring countless individuals to embrace lives of service and charity. She was not a passive recipient of religious doctrine, but an active force in shaping and living out its ideals, demonstrating how royal women could be leading figures in shaping religious culture and practice. These queens, through their foundation's patronage, personal piety, and direct involvement in religious movements, were integral to the religious life of the medieval period. They were not mere followers, but influential patrons, reformers, and sometimes even founders of religious traditions, actively shaping the spiritual landscape of their kingdoms. Number 1. Queens were always seen as inferior or weak figures. A prevailing misconception is that medieval queens were universally perceived as inherently inferior or weak simply because of their gender. This view does not align with the historical evidence, which shows many queens were highly respected, revered, and seen as indispensable pillars of the monarchy. Their roles were not merely complementary but essential for dynastic legitimacy, political stability, and the moral standing of the kingdom. Their queens could command armies, govern territories, conduct diplomacy, and inspire loyalty and affection, challenging any notion of inherent weakness. Their status as queen often imbued them with immense prestige and authority, sometimes even surpassing that of their husbands in specific contexts or during periods of crisis. Emma of Normandy, who was Queen of England first as wife to Aethelred the Unready, and then to Cnut the Great in the 11th century, demonstrates a queen whose influence and status were far from weak. She navigated a tumultuous period of Viking invasions and changes in dynastic rule. After Aethelred's death, she strategically married Cnut, the Viking conqueror, a move that helped to legitimize his rule in England and ensure the survival of her sons. After Cnut's death, she actively worked to secure the throne for her son Harthanet, even serving as regent during his absence. Her role as a queen dowager was particularly powerful. She held vast dower lands and wielded considerable political influence, presiding over councils and issuing charters in her own name. She commissioned the Encomium Emmae Reginae, a flattering biographical work that solidified her public image as a wise and powerful queen. Even when briefly sidelined by her stepson Harold Harefoot, she returned to power, showcasing her resilience and enduring status. She was a powerful figure who navigated political changes and personal dangers with strength, proving her perceived importance and capabilities. Empress Theophanu, regent of the Holy Roman Empire for her young son Otto III, as discussed earlier, was certainly not seen as a weak figure. Her reign as regent for over a decade, from 983 to 994, was a period of remarkable stability and growth for the Holy Roman Empire. She successfully quelled rebellions by powerful German nobles, demonstrated her mastery of imperial administration, and pursued an active foreign policy that included maintaining alliances with powerful Byzantine and Slavic rulers. Contemporary chroniclers and powerful churchmen praised her intellect, her political acumen, and her strength in governing the vast empire. And her ability to maintain control and ensure the succession of her son against significant odds earned her widespread respect and admiration. Her very title, Imperatrix Augusta, emphasized her imperial authority, mirroring that of her male predecessors, demonstrating that her power was perceived as legitimate and formidable. She was a ruler to be reckoned with, respected by her contemporaries. Eleanor of Aquitaine, in her long and eventful life, continuously commanded respect and exerted powerful influence, even in old age. After her release from Henry II's imprisonment, she became a powerful regent for her son Richard the Lionheart, actively governing England during his absence on crusade and during his captivity. She personally oversaw his ransom and negotiated treaties, demonstrating her undiminished political acumen. She continued to advise her youngest son, King John, even in her 80s, traveling across Europe to arrange politically crucial marriages for her granddaughters. Her extraordinary longevity and sustained political activity meant that she was a legendary figure in her own lifetime, admired for her intelligence, resilience, and unwavering dedication to her dynastic interests. She was not only respected for her royal lineage, but for her personal capabilities and her sheer force of will that allowed her to shape European politics for over 60 years. Her influence was not seen as weak, but as an enduring force that shaped multiple reigns and kingdoms. The Blanche of Castile, Queen and Regent of France, also provides a strong counter-narrative to the idea of a weak queen. During her regency for Louis IX, she faced down a confederation of powerful and rebellious French barons who openly challenged her authority, specifically because she was a woman and a foreigner. However, Blanche did not shrink from the challenge. She personally rode at the head of royal armies, showing her unwavering resolve and inspiring loyalty among her supporters. She used her intelligence and diplomatic skills to divide her enemies and successfully brought them to heel. Her decisive actions solidified the young king's position and strengthened the Capetian monarchy. Far from being seen as weak, her contemporaries, even her adversaries, grudgingly acknowledged her formidable strength and political skill. She maintained authority with a firm hand and was widely seen as a highly effective and powerful ruler, essential for the stability of France. Margaret of Denmark, the architect of the Kalmar Union, was arguably one of the most powerful rulers in medieval Europe, regardless of gender. She inherited her father's political genius and, through a combination of diplomacy, strategic alliances, and military prowess, managed to unite the three Scandinavian kingdoms under her authority. She was known for her shrewdness, her practical approach to governance, and her ability to outmaneuver her male rivals. Her authority was so absolute that despite having a male heir, she maintained direct control over the Union until her death. Her subjects and foreign powers alike recognized her as the true power behind the throne, referring to her as the Lady Queen, or the King without pants, a backhanded compliment that acknowledged her masculine strength. Her long and successful rule fundamentally reshaped the political landscape of Northern Europe and left an enduring legacy. Her contemporaries did not view her as weak, they viewed her as the formidable, undisputed ruler of three kingdoms. These examples emphatically demonstrate that many medieval queens were far from being perceived as weak or inferior figures. They were respected for their intellect, their political acumen, their administrative skills, their courage, and their ability to govern effectively. They were crucial to the functioning of monarchies, often acting as the decisive force in periods of crisis or transition, leaving no doubt about their strength and indispensability.